Hello, Tubby and Coos fans and OBONO fans. I'm really excited to be here today with our One Book, One New Orleans celebration of 16 years. This is going to be a really awesome event. We have some amazing authors that are going to speak today over the course of the next hour, and I'm excited to get started. So I would love to welcome with me the executive director of One Book, One New Orleans, Megan Holtz. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Candace. How are you?
I'm good. And we do have a few people watching already, so yay.
Awesome.
So Megan is going to introduce the event and tell y'all a little bit about One Book, One New Orleans.
So this event is my dream, 16 years in the making. I've always wanted to get as many one book authors together as possible under one roof to read their work and really celebrate literacy and community. And now we're here together under a virtual roof, and it's really amazing. So thank you so much to Tubby and Coos for helping make this happen. One Book, One New Orleans was founded in 2004 as a project of the Young Leadership Council. And in 2018, we officially spun off from the Young Leadership Council and became our own nonprofit. Throughout the 16 years, whether we were a project of the YLC or we were a project of, our own nonprofit, we have dedicated ourselves to picking one book every year and encouraging everyone in the city to read the same book at the same time, with the idea that we are stronger as a city through a shared reading experience. Now, in doing that, what we have to remember is that our city has approximately a 27 functional illiteracy rate among our adults. So One Book, One New Orleans recognizes its responsibility to make sure that the book becomes accessible to all New Orleanians from all walks of life. In that, we partner with 6 amazing organizations, and we get the book through our partnerships into the hands of adult ed classes, high-sec classes, ESL classes, and juvenile detention classes in now 7 parishes in Louisiana. We also get that book into the hands of prisoners throughout the state, and we get that book into the ears of the blind and print handicapped through a partnership with WRVH Reading Radio. So we become One Book, One New Orleans, reaching out to everyone. And then to bring everyone together, we have a series of free, family-friendly community events, such as this one. This would have maybe been a community event that we could have all come to and had some free food and enjoyed ourselves, but instead we're enjoying ourselves virtually. And that is One Book in a nutshell.
Thanks, Megan, for explaining that. And our first reader is supposed to be John Barry. He's not quite here yet. So Megan is going to share with us some testimonials of some of the readers who have been through One Book, One New Orleans.
Cool. So a few years back, we partnered with a few different adult education programs and did this really fun thing where students wrote about what lifelong learning meant to them. So I actually have a couple here from adults at different levels. This one I'm about to read comes from a woman who is studying for her HiSET. And for those of you guys who don't know what the HiSET is, it is the Louisiana equivalent of the GED. So it's the high school equivalency exam. And I'll read what lifelong learning means to this person studying for the HiSET. A lifelong learner doesn't just stop at high school or stay in the same state. They go out and experience the real world. For example, by learning a new trade or language or a new dance move, you are being a lifelong learner. If you're not a lifelong learner, you will never know what's going on. In order for me to become a lifelong learner, I feel that I have to first test out in all subjects on the HiSET. After that, I can attend college and get my associate's degree in business and management. Maybe then I can go on internship at leasing offices. By having that experience, I can become a real estate agent or investor By the way, an investor makes a lot more money than an agent. They can buy broken down houses for little to no money, flip them, and sell them for hundreds of thousands more dollars than they bought them for. I then could save up some money and open up a child care center. By me following this plan, I am being a lifelong learner. I won't just stop at an associate's degree. I'll be a bachelor's degree in business, child development, or entrepreneurship. That way, I will always have knowledge, a job, and will be able to know more in life than if I just stopped at school. So that's an example of someone who received books from One Book, One New Orleans, and then got to keep those books and use those books to further their vocabulary and their reading and comprehension skills in preparation for their high set. And I actually got the opportunity to see this student walk across the stage last year and graduate too, which was really exciting.
Thanks for that, Megan. And we're still waiting for our authors to join here. So I was actually just emailing with someone who was having a little bit of trouble. So if you want to keep talking about one book, I will try to get these authors on here.
Sure thing. Actually, what's really exciting is seeing adult learners at all different levels benefit from our books. So right now I'm going to read you one, and this one comes from someone who I think their instructor told me reads at about a 3rd grade level, or did when they wrote this. They're a little bit further along now, which is exciting. So in order to sort of give you an idea of the different levels of comprehension where students are coming in, and they're always so excited, every adult education program in New Orleans has a wait list, and we are determined to get books to every single one of them. So here is lifelong learning means to another person, 3rd grade level education. I think lifelong learning means you learn every day. I don't want to stop learning. I want to learn forever. I think it's important to continue learning because if people were to stop learning, no one would know anything. If people stopped learning, certain things would not exist today, such as driver's ed and technology and school and other things. Basically, life would never be the same as today. Such a beautiful testament. If people stop learning, life ceases to progress. That's a really cool idea that I think applies whether you read at the 3rd grade level, whether you completed graduate school. If you don't continue to learn things, your life kind of stops. And it's amazing to see that as someone who's involved with one book play out year after year after year, watching our books become used as educational tools. And another great author that you will definitely hear from today is Liz Williams. And I want to tell a story about when we did Liz Williams' book, New Orleans, a Food Biography. This was 2018. And we partnered that year with North Shore Technical Community College in their ESL program. So people who were just learning English for the first time were using New Orleans, a Food Biography to learn to read. And what happened was I got a call from the instructor, and she said, guess what, Megan? Through the food vocabulary and being able to practice talking about food, one of my students today came and told me that they got a promotion. They're now no longer working as a line cook in the back of the house. They're now working as a sushi chef in the front of the house because the book gave them the skills to be able to interact with their customers. And that, to me, it made my life, because it is a testament to how reading the right book at the right time can change your future for the better. And I'm so, so happy to be a part of One Book, One New Orleans. And can I just give a shout out, by the way, to all of our volunteers, because without them coming year after year, day after day, and bringing their passion and their energy, this would not take place. Candace, how you doing over there?
I have sent the info, so we're just waiting on some folks to join. But we do have Liz Williams if we want to have her go now instead of later.
Cool.
So I will introduce Liz. So Liz was actually is the author of New Orleans, a food biography, which was One Book, One New Orleans 2018 selection. And Liz, grew up eating in these great food traditions of New Orleans and of Sicily. And she's the founder of the National Food and Beverage Foundation. And so we're going to have her tell us a little bit more about New Orleans, a food biography, and talk about her experience with OBONO. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. It's my first time doing something like this, so I'm kind of excited. First, I want to say thanks to Megan and Candace for putting this program together. I think it's definitely a time right now where New Orleans needs to come together as one New Orleans. So this is a fabulous opportunity. And I also know that New Orleans, a food biography, was a very exciting year for me in 2018. And now that everybody's home eating and cooking, and I hope also supporting restaurants, we're aware of how important food is in giving us comfort and creating a sense of identity. So I want to give a shout out to all of the culinary workers and the farm workers and fishers and truckers and grocery personnel who are continuing to brave the hazards of this virus to make food available to all of us. So I'm going to read from the preface of my book. Talks a lot about food in New Orleans. I've been studying the history of food of New Orleans in one way or another since I began to eat. In this way, I am like every other lucky person, lucky enough to have grown up in this city. I have a bit of old New Orleans and new New Orleans in my personal family history, but on both sides, there's an appreciation of food. Food, eating, and sharing it is associated with the happy times as well as the sad ones. Food is love, it is worship, it is celebration, it is condolence, it is memory, it is identity. And when I say food, I include drink, whether it is coffee or spirits or other special drinks. New Orleans takes care with anything that involves flavor. I am particularly pleased with this opportunity now to write the story of the food of New Orleans because after the flood caused by the failure of the federal levee system following Hurricane Katrina, the sense of place established and held together by eating in New Orleans has been undergoing a huge change of emphasis and focus. It is now both more grounded in tradition and looking forward to the future. Change itself is certainly not something to be avoided. It has been the city's ability to bend with change, ever adapting, that has allowed it to maintain such a rich and nurturing and nourishing cuisine. I have no wish to stop change, but I do want to remember where we have been. An appreciation of the past will allow us to march forward with an understanding of the continuum to the future. Because I choose to continue to live in New Orleans, I will probably change with the city. So with full disclosure, I admit that my attempt to tell an accurate story may be to no avail. It is likely that my own opinions, formed as I grew up and tasted, formed as I traveled and tasted, and formed by some investigation of history, have colored the way that I present the story of the food of New Orleans. So in that sense, this is also my story. Despite that I have tried to confine my voice to this section, you'll find it everywhere. I'm not unlike so many New Orleanians. We live in a city with a sense of place, a sense of history and character. It's not anywhere USA. That sense of place that seems to bind all of us. Growing up in a sensuous city allows a person to appreciate the senses without realizing that you are. When I was a child, I thought everyone cared about smells and sounds, sights and textures, and most of all, taste. I think that every New Orleanian grows up with this swirling sensuousness all around him. Since so many of us denizens of the city remain in New Orleans for our entire lives, whether from inertia or lack of opportunity, many of us fail to appreciate how special it is here. Without having seen how others live or eat, we have no point of comparison. It takes the outsider to come here to appreciate the wonder of it and to make us see what we have taken for granted. Those of us who leave often return drawn back to deep flavor and a need for a grounded place. I had my awakening in Augusta, Georgia, where I foolishly ordered trout almondine at a white tablecloth restaurant in 1975. I should have known that fresh trout might not readily be available there. I was served fish sticks, literally previously frozen formed rectangles of fish, with chopped almonds and dried parsley on top. After recovering from the shock of it, I realized that I was not in New Orleans anymore. In addition to my good fortune regarding my place of origin, I was born into a half-Sicilian family. My grandmother, Elisabetta, and my grandfather, Francesco, were Sicilian. My mother was first-generation American. She grew up speaking the Sicilian dialect, learning English when she went to school. She was a part of the large Sicilian community in New Orleans. Because she was my mother and the family culture bearer, I learned to eat, appreciating food and family in New Orleans with a Sicilian twist. My father brought old Louisiana French and a bit of Alabama cracker to the family. That meant there was a country sensibility in his attitude, as well as an appreciation for simple things. Because my father wasn't Sicilian, we spoke English at home, and I didn't spend my entire growing up years within the Sicilian community. We, my brother and I, moved in and out of it. Sometimes we attended family gatherings redolent of garlic, lots of shouting, huge hugs with those awful cheek pinches, and more Sicilian dialect. At other times, we quietly visited fields and dusty roads where we ate meat pies and cornbread. My Alabama grandfather made the best angel food cake ever. He beat the egg whites by hand. I still have his angel food cake pan. He also drank coffee that he dripped 1 cup at a time and poured into warmed cups. He grew the very best peaches in his backyard. But mostly we lived in middle-class, urban American neighborhoods, riding bikes, watching Saturday morning television, and going to school. I have eaten my share of TV dinners and fast food. I am not a purist. As I have grown up, traveled, and matured, I have come to appreciate the city for nurturing the senses. Certainly, my naive childhood presumption that my experience reflected the way of all things has been dispelled. I understand that consuming the world is not generally considered an appropriate way to live. What a pity. I don't want us to move into and out of the information age and discover that we have lost an appreciation of the subtle layerings of taste, having homogenized the world in our quest for security, speed, and cost efficiency. I want everyone to be fortunate enough to be allowed to be open to the subtleties of the tastes, the textures, the aromas, and the flavors of food. This book will not be a history that tries to identify definitively the origins of this dish or that, as though there could be only one influence on each dish. There has to have been social invention involved in the development of cuisine rather than individual inventors. The invention of the cuisine of New Orleans has been a collective one, and it continues to be so. And unlike the specific dishes invented intentionally at restaurants, such as Bananas Foster, developing a cuisine is an evolving and emergent process. It is a process that is always in flux. It is complicated by the fact that sometimes similar foods or methods may spontaneously develop in different locations. Social invention results in a product that belongs to everyone. That is true of the food of New Orleans. Instead of seeking historical ties to ethnic origins of individual foods, This book will examine the philosophical and cultural forces that made a cuisine develop in New Orleans, even when similar and abundant raw ingredients and similar waves of ethnic groups came together in other locations without resulting in a cuisine. Even if the recognition of a local cuisine was intentional marketing, there is ample basis for declaring that the cuisine existed to be recognized. If there is myth involved, which there surely is, what are the basis of and the purpose of the myth? I hope to convey to the reader the degree to which my food permeates the culture and the thinking of the city. Food unites all of the people of New Orleans. Each New Orleanian respects the culinary opinion of every other New Orleanian, regardless of class, education, or status. We may argue about the fine points of a dish, but it is with respect. We talk about lunch when we are eating breakfast. We know that people of all classes and positions in society all can and do cook. Food is that basic and ubiquitous. In writing this book, I have relied on the expertise and insights of numerous people who have written many books and articles. These are people whom I deeply respect for their ability to discover and dig deeply into original documents in different languages and report and interpret those materials for us. I prefer to cook and eat my way to enlightenment, but I believe that I have legitimately used their research to explore the factors that have created this cuisine. In his memoir, Hungry Town, Tom Fitzmaurice, a local food commentator, says with no irony that this is a city where food is almost everything. In a city where food means so much, where it is part of every element of life, a mere exploration of dishes and their recipes would not scratch the surface of meaning. It is with an attempt to capture and share that real meaning, that almost everything, that this book is written. So that is my preface. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. That was really great. And we really appreciate you sharing that with us. I'm going to share some of the comments that some folks have been putting up just to let you know. Andrea says that her students will still talk about your book. So FYI, there are people who are really liking it. And Joanne says hello, and she's was really interested to hear History and Food of NOLA from you. So thank you for sharing, and it looks like people have been enjoying your reading.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Liz. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So we're back with Megan, who is the executive director, to introduce our next author.
All right, next up we have joining us from New York City, Ned Sublette. Among other things, Ned is an expert on Cuban music and the author of our 2012 selection, The World That Made New Orleans from Spanish Silver to Congo Square. So without further ado, take it away, Ned.
If you can hear me. Oops, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Tell me in a comment that you can hear me, and I'll be much, much happier. Okay, there I am. Look at that. I was kind of looking for something to read. I'm audio only today, folks. I don't really feel like having my little tiny apartment in New York City broadcast to the world, if you don't mind. But let's try to find something to read from The World That Made New Orleans. And I looked through it, and I really couldn't find anything particularly appropriate for this moment, although there are all kinds of connections to be made. So much of what we're seeing is built out of elements that are familiar to people who know American history. Even something like anti-vax sentiment, for example. This goes back all the way to the beginnings of vaccinations in America. Ben Franklin's first job in newspapers was at an anti-vaccination newspaper. Um, but I'm sitting here thinking about how history asks different questions at different times. It's almost as though we need to rewrite history yet one more time. That's why historians never run out of work. There's always a need to write a new book of history. But hasn't history already been thoroughly described and ransacked for details now? No, it hasn't. Because history is what we ask of the giant database that is the past. History is what we need to know right now. And now we're faced with a situation that, for all the familiar elements um, we can think of that go into it, this is really an unprecedented situation in the history of the country, just as the environmental crisis and climate change that we are facing is unprecedented in human history. I look forward to seeing what the next generation can do, what questions they will ask of history, and what they will see to correct in the history that we wrote. I know in my case, The World That Made New Orleans, I began writing The World That Made New Orleans during a year when I had a fellowship to be at Tulane, a memorable year. Everybody who's serious about American music needs to spend a year at least in New Orleans, watch the seasons turn around. But I started working on it in 2004, published it in 2008. Obviously, what happened in between was the failure of the levees, the flooding of the city in New Orleans as near-death experience. And that completely affected the perspective with which I saw New Orleans history. Now we're looking at a situation that's going to affect once again how we see New Orleans history as we remember all those epidemics, all those pandemics that happened from the yellow fever epidemic in 1793, the first yellow fever epidemic in 1793, the cholera epidemic, the first one in 1832, the third wave in the late 1840s that killed President James Polk, who had just left office, who was visiting New Orleans, went to a dinner with 250 people already sick with cholera from the boat he came in. And the mayor, Abdel Crossman, denied there was cholera in the city, and he had to shake hands with everyone there. He died a few weeks later. All these elements that we can see. I was looking at a video shortly after the lockdown began, a video of an empty Jackson Square with just the church bells tolling. And I thought, how many times have people died in New Orleans? How many times have church bells rung? And at the same time, there's something going on now that is outside what we have experienced before. Certainly anything I've experienced in my lifetime. It's even as important as the history of the 1918 pandemic, which should have been called the Kansas flu because it started in Kansas. That as important as that history has become now, it's not a guide to future events. It's only a way to understand future events. I want to share one memory about my one book, one New Orleans moment. It was probably the most exciting thing that's happened to me as an author, to have New Orleans reading my book of course, it comes with a buy-in. It comes with buying the largest single purchase, I think, of the book that has been made, which makes not only contributes a little bit to the writer's bottom line, but also makes your publisher believe in you more. It's really, really a very, very important tool for a writer to be able to say, my book was a one New Orleans. And I just want to tell you something that from the moment that I came to New Orleans in 2012, to for the event around the One New Orleans selection of the world that made New Orleans. They gave a dinner for my book. Oh my God, at Dookie Chase. Be Still My Beating Heart, right? And Leah Chase was there. Of course she was, supervising the salads, making sure everything that went out was just right. And she was enticed to come out from the kitchen and say a few words. And to hear Leah Chase, this is the one time I met her actually, to hear Leah Chase speaking at an event for my book, it's a thrill that still I haven't quite gotten over. My takeaway memory from it is I remember her saying that from the time she was a little girl, her father had taught her that you must have wine with your meals, and started giving her, as a child already, a diluted little glass of wine. And I thought, how very New Orleans. I think I've blown through my 5 minutes by now, so I'll yield to Rebecca, my dear friend Rebecca Snedeker. Hello, Rebecca. I'm going to pitch it to you now. Take it back, Candace. Take it back, Megan. I don't know if I've said anything of value or interesting or not, but thank you for having me. I'm very appreciative.
Thank you, Ned. We are very happy that you were able to join us. And I'm going to take this off the screen now. Hi, here I am again. And thank you so much, Ned. That was really great. And I just want to share with you some of the comments from some folks that were listening. Martha said that The World That Made New Orleans, she loved it. And also The Year Before the Flood. So she really loved your books. And Andrea said that this was her first one book, and that your book is what got her hooked on one book. So I just wanted to make sure. And also Amy said, great homage to Leah Chase. She really valued all artists. So I just wanted to share those with you too, Ned. People really enjoyed it. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, and as Ned said, Rebecca Snedeker is our next reader, and Rebecca is the James H. Clark Executive Director of the New Orleans Center for the Gulf South, and she co-wrote Unfathomable City, a New Orleans Atlas, which was the, I believe, 2014 pick, for One Book, One New Orleans. And it was actually the first one book that Tubby and Coos was able to sell. And it's one of the best-selling books at our store. So I'm really excited to have Rebecca. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hello.
And I will leave you to it.
This is really, thank you for helping us learn this software. We're all like going beyond our comfort zones in so many ways. So this is a really cool platform, and it's an honor to be here celebrating One Book, One New Orleans. And hello, Ned, and everyone else out there. I want to shout out to Tubby and Coos Mid-City Bookshop and the New Orleans Book Festival at Tulane, and the whole all of your teams and the team at One Book, One New Orleans, because you have all worked tirelessly to support literacy in our beloved city. It was an extraordinary gift to have Unfathomable City, a New Orleans Atlas, chosen in 2014. And I'm here representing about 50 people who collaborated to bring the book to fruition. So of course, my co-editors, Rebecca Solnit and Josh Jelly Shapiro, but also many writers, visual artists, cartographers, and researchers. So I always try to just really honor everyone who was involved, and our team at University of California Press. The Atlas is a book that couples maps and essays. There's 22 maps and essays in the book. And during the One Book, One New Orleans season, at different events around the city with different partners, we really plumbed the book and explored different dynamics and chapters and in with different people. And a few memories that stand out. One is that we worked with adult literacy learners, adults who were learning how to read, to create maps of their neighborhoods and cities. And that gave all of us a chance to reflect on the concept of geographical literacy and what it means to read a map or to read place signs and how that can change one's lives. And in general, just the overarching importance of having an understanding of where we are in the world. Today I'm going to read the introduction to an essay called Holding It Together, Falling Apart, that's been on my mind during COVID, because it has to do with the ways that we find relief in the city. It started as a project related to like care and positive things, but there are a lot of ways we find relief that aren't necessarily healthy. Sometimes they're harmful, and it's hard to tell the differences between them. And I feel that way with COVID, as we all make these choices, big and small, like, should we go procure some produce, or should we stay at home and hunker down and not be exposed to anything? We're just making so many decisions every day to try to figure out how to take care of ourselves and our loved ones and others. So I think I'll go ahead and start. Oh, I was going to mention that when we did an event related to this map and essay, we were fortunate to be at Ashe Cultural Arts Center, which is such the like a heart touchstone place for many of us here. And we had a panel conversation with a voodoo priestess and a pharmacist from Xavier and a medical doctor. And this is the introduction to the essay. Holding it together, falling apart. Dirt mixed with the meat of Japanese plums I plucked from the tree in our backyard. Grass from the nearby cemetery, crushed with pink crepe myrtle blossoms and rainwater. A bit of mom's pearly black soap dissolved in salt water. I don't remember how, as a child, I came to believe that these potions would have some effect, but I do remember the comfort of mixing and offering them up. The small white clamshells in our driveway held just the right dose for a doll or a dog. My mother, in the grip of mania, was in her own world, and she let me roam and do my thing too. I read stories about Florence Nightingale and Marie Laveau and pretended to be a nurse on the shores of the Black Sea, a hoodoo priestess on Lake Pontchartrain. I was raised in an Episcopal church in school, but my spirituality, my understanding of the world and how it works, is distinctly New Orleanian, which also means it is African. The African idea of grigri or fetish, the old idea that an object has a soul or anima, is normal here. I collected acorns and magnolia pods, bits of the outdoors that carry the key to a tree, and grouped them with special objects, like the porcelain figurines that my grandmother had passed on to me. Although I didn't call them altars at the time, that's what they were. In the human quest to take care of ourselves, we've developed many concoctions. Gaseous, liquid, or solid, they are home remedies, pharmaceutical drugs, street drugs, balms, lotions, salves, and salts. They come via apothecaries, pharmacies, clinics, hospitals, bars, street corners, places of worship. And then there are our internal pharmacies, our amazing bodies, releasing endorphins and quickening our heartbeats as we laugh, make love, or enjoy a view, releasing adrenaline when something is going wrong. We see, smell, touch, hear, and taste in this hunger for care. Here in New Orleans, everything that goes into the mixed up potion pot of healing effort, religion, faith, chemistry, pharmacy, science, vistas, fragrance, touch, and loving care, gets ground up with the ongoing violence, addiction, and numbness by the pestle of the city. In 7th grade chemistry class, I encountered the periodic table of elements. I was going to say blessings, the periodic table of elements, and found lithium, Li, which my mother had been prescribed, but which she didn't always take. At the time, she was frustrated by how it tempered her spirit. It's not always to see the difference. It's not always easy to see the difference between the concoctions that are ultimately helpful for us and those that do harm. Distinguishing between them can be like drawing a line in silt. All right, I'm going to kick it back to y'all, Megan and Candace. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Rebecca, for being here. I'm going to bring Megan back on. But first, I also want to share with you some comments, as I've done with everyone else. Some folks have been commenting while you were reading. And so let's see. Martha says that it's a great perspective and narrative on New Orleans history. And let's see. Oh, Andrea says that she learned so much to teach her students about how to make their own maps with this book, which I think is pretty cool. And Martha says periodic table of blessings is a lovely idea. And a couple of people love that. Amy liked it as well. And Amy also said this reading gave her that feeling of hope that New Orleans will be okay. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here and sharing with us.
My pleasure. It's an honor to be here.
And so I'm going to bring Megan back on. Hi, Megan, to introduce our next reader.
All right, next up we have Kim Vaz-Deville. Kim is the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Xavier University. She's the author of Walking Ratty, The Baby Dolls of New Orleans, and the author of our 2016 selection, The Baby Dolls, Breaking the Racial and Gender Barriers of the New Orleans Mardi Gras Tradition. Without further ado, take it away, Kim.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. This is my first experience with this kind of format as well. I just want to say that I'm a sentimental type. So I remember when the book was nominated and all the community support that I received. People really wanted this book to be the One Book, One New Orleans selection. And what happened next in terms of community literacy was, I think, an embodiment of the mission of One Book, One New Orleans. But first, I want to say thank you to Candace for organizing this, and Megan for her vision, and the New Orleans Book Festival at Tulane for their support. So once the book was announced as the selection, we began planning the events. And Megan noted that over 25 women who mask as baby dolls were involved in all the public events. And our first event was at Judy, blanking on her name, but it was at Upoopadoo Bar. And it was called Red Beans and Read. And it was such an exciting opportunity. Some of the women who mask at baby dolls made their own displays with family mementos. And literacy really became part of masking as a baby doll. This particular book, which One Book, One New Orleans made sure all baby dolls had, was something that they began to say with new members. You are now Judy Hill. Thanks, Megan, for reminding me. Judy Hill of Upoopadoo Bar was so gracious to allow us to have the Red Beans and Read there. But every baby doll group then began to say, you have to read the baby dolls book so that you can know the tradition. And so with that, they really began their connection to literacy. I'm just going to read from the book because the best thing that came out of the book was people's stories. And one thing I learned, that who a baby doll was in terms of what this masking tradition was highly dependent upon the year someone was living when they saw the baby dolls masking, the section of town, and so it was very much a function of who they were and what year it was, because the tradition in some ways defies easy definition, but it is a group of men and women who will dress up as baby dolls. Some say it came from, the sporting life, the fast life during the Storyville era. And others say that it came because of the vaudeville tradition of grown-up women putting on little girls' costumes and lots of songs, popular songs being written about grown-up women as little girls. But nonetheless, it was one of the few Black women's street masking traditions in New Orleans. It certainly was the earliest. And so I'll just read a description of what the baby dolls were like, according to one observer who saw them on Claiborne Avenue. The baby dolls were something to see. Every year they flaunted a different getup, but they always had bloomers and tight skirts 10 to 12 inches above the knee. Sometimes they wore false long curls topped with bonnets, derbies, or pillbox hats. Backed by a combo of baby dolls, stepping out time was 10 a.m. rain, or whatever. And as the saying goes, they would shake up a storm. They'd raise their walking canes or tambourines high in the air, rhythmically shaking their bodies to the ground. Not to be upstaged, the gold diggers would show up in elaborate apparel. They were more or less remembered for displaying money in their stockings and flirting with the male spectators. When the baby dolls and gold diggers weren't stealing the show, there were groups of second liners, including men dressed like women, some making music with wash tubs. So that was a very, very fun scene. I want to share with you another memory from Maurice Martinez. He said, "What can I tell you about the baby dolls? Many of them carried the reputation throughout the year. There goes Miss Baby Doll. They always seemed to have some time to stop, no matter how rushed they were. How you doing, child? Hello, honey. I remember you. How's your mama and them?" They valued the interpersonal relationship. They valued people over things. We didn't have many things because of rampant poverty. I faced a lot of discrimination. And so even though we were trying to do the right thing, we couldn't get very much. But that's why I'm so proud of those who had the courage to take it to the streets in costume, like the walking groups such as the Baby Dolls and the Black Masking Indians. They had a spirit that refused to be crushed. So the Baby Dolls in 2013, this book was launched with an exhibition. It allowed more baby dolls or people masking as baby dolls to enhance the pride they had in this long-standing tradition. It brought to the fore a conversation about the ambivalence that New Orleanians felt about the baby dolls, whether they were, some women who were just loose or whether they were real members of the community. It allowed family members whose relatives were masked as baby dolls to have pride and to pull out those pictures and begin to tell those stories. And it really spawned a resurgence of what we see today as the baby dolls. It brings them great pride that there are 2 books that speak about them directly and what it is that they're trying to do. And I'll finish with a quote, because baby dolls still live hard, scrapple lives. And one baby doll said, "When you're out there, you forget about the bad stuff and separate yourself from it. When we are masking and dancing, it's not about the bad stuff. We release the tension through dancing. That is where we get our energy and our motivation. We express ourselves to each other and the world. If we can go on like we don't have a care in the world and dance, we can rub off on someone else that's going through something. This is New Orleans, where we speak to each other on the street. Imagine what we can do as a group when we are performing in front of thousands. We are like them. It is just that we are together and we are safe, and it's okay to feel free." So when people ask the question, who is this baby doll, and why is she referred to as such? Baby dolls are people full of fun who invite the community to be at play as a vital cultural reaffirmation of their faith in their own abilities to soldier on and meet life's unexpected challenges. Thanks, Candace. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Kim. And as I've done with some other folks, I'm going to share with you some of the comments because we have some cool comments from folks about the baby dolls. Andrea says it was cool to get to see and meet some of the baby dolls at one of these one book events, and that your book celebrates the beauty and strength of our amazing New Orleans women. We also have from Amy, the first time she saw the baby dolls was at a 12th night party at House of Blues on Decatur featuring Al Johnson. She had recently moved to town and was in awe, had never seen a spectacle like that, turned my feminist assumptions on their head. And then Elisa says she learned about the baby dolls from Shiro's, Antoinette Cato and Tiva Perry. And where we speak to each other on the street, I feel like New Orleans is real street theater every day. So that's what some folks in the comments were talking about. during your reading. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and I'm really excited that you were here.
Thank you.
And I'll bring Megan back as well. Hi, Megan, to introduce our next reader.
So next up, we have Bryan Boyles. Bryan Boyles is formerly the publisher of 64 Parishes magazine, and now he is the director of Mass Humanities. And he is the author of New Orleans Boom and Blackout, 100 Days in America's Coolest Hotspot, which was our 2015 selection. Take it away, Bryan.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Candace. It's good to talk to you all, and I really appreciate you all doing this. I'm now in Massachusetts, but I miss everyone quite a good deal, and I look back at my experience with one book with just a great deal of gratitude. The book that I wrote, which was my first book, New Orleans Boom and Blackout, in a lot of ways was the culmination of 7 or 8 years of work that I had done at the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities and Louisiana Humanities Center. And in a lot of ways, I felt like it was, getting things off my chest, things that I had learned piecemeal that I wanted to funnel into one short narrative, and also a way to say thanks to a lot of people. So many of the people in the book are folks who I had known through other avenues, and I thought that they deserved a voice in that particular, history of New Orleans at that time, which was late 2012, early 2013. Sometimes I get that mixed up, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. So you were able through one book to do a series of really amazing events, many of them set in the places that I wrote about. And I think as an author, along with the great things that come with being a one-book author, particularly the fact that your books reach people who are incarcerated, the opportunity for me, given the nature of the book, to go back sort of to some of the scenes and thank people. So in the case of a Celebration Hall on St. Bernard Avenue, we were able to do a big party with the To Be Continued brass band, who were really key to the book. And so it was a way to come back and in a little way let the book thank and give some revenue even to the places that were its subject. I'm going to read from towards the end of the book. One of the events we did was at Dillard with Allison Fensterstock, who I've known since I was at Tulane as a kid, and Wild Wayne from Q93. So it was a really great time talking specifically about Lil Wayne as a world figure, or a representative of New Orleans music, on par with Fats Domino, on par with Alan Toussaint. So I'm going to read a piece that starts at a party that Wayne performed at on St. Charles Avenue the night before the Super Bowl. This was the GQ party. Someone was able to get me in, as well as Allison, actually. And I'll start there, and it culminates back on Bourbon Street, which was central to the book. And when I think about New Orleans now, and certainly day to day have a great longing for it, but especially with so many things shut down, I think about all the people that work in the quarter and really make that economy happen, and hoping that they're going to come through this and be able to regain their livelihood soon. So this is starting from page 189, New Orleans Boom and Blackout. Standing next to a sleek new Mercedes, I met Mr. and Mrs. Mike Rubenstein of Rubenstein's, the famous clothing store opened in 1924 at the corner of St. Charles and Canal. They were invited to the GQ party, Mr. Rubenstein told me, because the store sold Lacoste, one of the night's brands. When their daughter called to ask how the party was, Mrs. Rubenstein moved further up in the crowd for a report, leaving Mr. Rubenstein and I there to converse, and I admit for me to admire the gentleman's clothes. He was my height and wore a blue jacket over a green shirt, striped tie, and dark pants, along with simple wire-rimmed glasses. Despite my envy, Mr. Rubenstein was such a regular guy that we easily fell into conversation. Business on Canal Street, he said, suffered during the streetcar construction, no doubt. They had a busy week for the Super Bowl, a lot of people in the store. We compared neighborhoods we lived in or used to live in. He knew that Lil Wayne emerged from a group of other local rappers, and I credited Wayne's industriousness and lyricism. Mr. Rubenstein said he used to see Fats Domino on Bourbon, along with Pete Fountain, Al Hurt, and other local heroes. He even told me a dirty story about Pete Fountain, which was that Pete Fountain had a tattoo of a bird on his bird. Surrounded by brands and out-of-town marketers, we talked as locals do about legends and famous corners. Then the music grew loud. The DJ asked us yet again if we were ready, and Lil Wayne burst forth to If I Die Today, a song with all the metallic apocalypse of today's commercial rap. His verse closed with an updated version of the old St. James Infirmary request. Load up the choppers like it's December 31st. Roll up and cock it and hit them where it hurts. If I die today, remember me like John Lennon, buried in Louis. I'm talking all brown linen, huh? When the track cut, he greeted us. How y'all doing tonight? My name is Dwayne Carter. You can call me Lil Wayne. You can call me Tunchi. I'm from this great place you are at right now, Lil Louisiana, New Orleans. If you are not from here, make some noise. If you're glad to be here, make some noise. What team you going for? And people called out names. Before I get started, I must let you know 3 important things about myself. 1 is I believe in God. Number 2 is I ain't shit without you. And the most important is I ain't shit without you. Seriously, if you came to have a good time, say hell yeah. Hell yeah. If you're here to have a great fucking time, say hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am your great time. Let's go. The GQ party turned into a forest of raised arms. No one pushed or danced. They were stylish adults with an open bar and connections, partygoers who could restrain their emotions. But Instagram the moment, without a doubt. You couldn't play off being in the same room as Lil Wayne as no big deal. Lil Wayne from New Orleans was as A-list as they came in 2013. Mr. Rubenstein and his wife were slightly amused and certainly not put off by all the cursing and bombast. They were New Orleanians too, who'd run a family business across Canal Street from Bourbon Street. They'd seen circuses before. When Wayne's set finished after 30 minutes, I wished them both well and stepped to the bar for a bottle of the newly debuted Beck's Sapphire. It was almost 3 a.m. when I returned to the quarter. Outside the Bienville Street entrance to the Old New Orleans Cookery, a mountain range of garbage bags hugged the curb as cooks and dishwashers smoked cigarettes and watched the stumbling parade pass on Bourbon Street. Cups, beads, and soggy cardboard filled the gutters along Bourbon. A young white man in a white sweatshirt stomped through a knee-deep patch of the filth, mumbling loudly that he was a grown man. Aside from his troubadour-like determination, he stuck out because he was in the distinct minority. The crowd on Bourbon Street appeared at least 3/4 black. Teenage boys with 1,000-yard stares hugged girls who sucked on lollipops. Groups gathered amid the procession to flirt and share drinks. In the famous street, their own unsupervised mall. This was common in the early morning hours when the street grew younger and it seemed more local. In the wee hours, the Super Bowl gave way to the status quo. Confused but seemingly concerned, a bum with a long beard sat against the Sheraton and contemplated his hand. An EMS vehicle had parked in the middle of the 500 block. The friends of whoever was inside argued with the paramedics. She's okay. She's okay, they insisted. And finally, a woman stepped down from the rear door on wobbly stilettos into the arms of her comrades. The navy blue EMS vehicle was not a traditional ambulance, but smaller, with a sleek cab. It looked like the perfect French Quarter rescue capsule. In the hierarchy of tourist destinations, the Superdomes, Jackson Square, the streetcars, everywhere else took a second place to Bourbon Street. Bourbon Street was ensconced deep within the genes of the New Orleans brand. Master plans could plot new demand spaces, but Bourbon was the city's Eiffel Tower, Millennium Park, and Vegas Strip. Thousands worked there, millions visited, and in contemporary America, nothing truly compared to it. At 3 a.m. on the morning of the Super Bowl, Bourbon Street was filled with teenagers sipping vodka from the bottle and serviced by emergency vehicles that allowed injured patrons to walk out the back door. The city had much to offer its visitors, but its most unique offering was a strip of land where you could drink all night in all-night bars or on the street until the sun came up. Wolves lurked on the side streets, ready to rob or proposition a boozy Minnesotan. People didn't get hit over the head inside Disney World, but on New Orleans' main tourist thoroughfare, you had to be careful. At Rick's Saloon, John Amos had dancers on both stages. It was now 4 a.m. The room was packed with men and twice as many dancers as usual, some perched on the men's laps, others who prowled back and forth. I took a stool at the front bar where a short blonde soon joined me. She had grown up in St. Bernard Parish, but her family recently moved to Slidell, where we joked everyone was scared of the immigrants from the parish. The women working tonight were more beautiful than usual, she observed. They came in for the game. An hour later, I walked off Bourbon. On St. Peter's Street, a green garbage truck crawled from door to door. One worker grabbed a plastic bin with the company's name, Progressive, and slid it in front of the Great Maw. in the truck's rear. A second worker positioned the bin on a lift attached to the truck and then guided the bin as the lift flipped it over, depositing its contents into the truck's teeth. As the bin tilted upside down, the second worker expertly dodged a rivulet of fluid. When all the trash was emptied, he pushed the bin back toward the curb where the first man waited to trade him another bin of trash. After 100 days pondering the New Orleans, I paused to watch the truck move along the poorly lit side street, methodically going about the upkeep of the Golden Goose. The cycle hadn't changed so much. New Orleans welcomed the big games, allowed the fans and corporate sponsors to run wild, and then cleaned up the mess. Many different jobs existed within that cycle, with trash collector among the lowest and most crucial. The next party was impossible if tonight's garbage wasn't picked up, and in this new era, there were more parties than ever, so more trash collectors were needed. The supply chain of the New Orleans might begin when a visitor arrived in a sparkling airport named after Louis Armstrong, but eventually it dwindled down to a couple men hoisting garbage cans into a truck labeled Progressive at 5 a.m. For the first time in my life, I hailed a pedicab. The driver had shoulder-length hair and acne brushstrokes on either cheek. As we pulled away, he stood up to pedal, his beautiful head bobbing up and down against the pale sky. His name was Mitchell. He was 19, and he had arrived from Chicago in September. "What do you think?" I asked him. "I love it," he said, with wonder. How else could he feel? He had cash in his pocket and a job in the French Quarter that allowed him to sleep in, only to reawaken in a city that encouraged him to remain poised at the edge of adulthood, meeting people who needed rides and told him things and asked him questions. I was once that age in another New Orleans, but I knew what he felt. No one should love New Orleans more than Mitchell. The question always would be, did New Orleans love him back? He deposited me in the parking lot of my office building in the Central Business District. I leaned against my car to watch the sunrise on Super Bowl Sunday. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Bryan. And we have some good comments as well for yours. First of all, this is my aunt, Linda, and Tubby, who is my grandpa, who Tubby and Coos is named after, was a big fan of Rubenstein. She misspelled that and corrected herself, but he was apparently a big fan. So she said that. We also, give me 1 second. I'm going to take this off so that we can see these better. There we go. So we also had Amy, who said that there are a lot of books around these post-recovery years that were like coming out of a 5-year fog. It took 5 years to get our heads together. And these books shine a light on that, like, we're still here and things are getting better time period, celebrating New Orleans. And it makes her even want more New Orleans books because there's so much still undocumented. And then Abram just said, hell yeah.
Thanks, Abram.
Reading. And then Amy said they did a Joan of Arc Houdat fan parade in the French market, and they carried black and gold pom-poms instead of a sword. And that was a year and a turning point, and everyone had felt better. Amy also mentioned pedicabs that were new to us then, and joyful nostalgia. And Andrea said, such an accurate tableau vivant. The French Quarter is really vivid through your description. So thank you very much. Joanne says, great read. So thank you very much for sharing this with us, Bryan. It's been awesome.
You take care.
You too. And so here's Megan one more time to introduce our next reader.
Hi, I will now introduce Zach Lazar. Zach is a teacher of creative writing at Tulane University. He's the author of many novels, including Sway, I Pity the Poor Immigrant, and our 2019 selection, Vengeance. Zach, take it away.
Hey there. Megan and Candace, thanks so much for putting this together. It's really a nice thing, especially at this time. And it's been great to see the other readers. What a great bunch of writers. And also to remember that I was at that Lil Wayne show all those years ago at the GQ party, and I haven't thought about that in a long time. I was talking to my friend Maurice Ruffin, a local writer who has a wonderful novel, and we were talking about Mardi Gras because Maurice had written a piece in the New York Times about Mardi Gras this year and some of the flack that New York was getting for having Mardi Gras. And Maurice made a very beautiful and persuasive argument that New Orleans nobody should be pointing any fingers at New Orleans. And while we were having that conversation over Zoom yesterday, because we can't have a conversation face to face in these times, it occurred to me that I knew what I wanted to read today, which is a section from my novel Vengeance about Mardi Gras. And in particular, I guess that's a section about doing Mardi Gras when you're also kind of fully aware of all the problems in the world, all the things that are always going on, and doing Mardi Gras anyway. So I'm just going to read that passage. We got up a little after 5 o'clock on Mardi Gras morning, very early, so that we could put on our costumes and visit some friends before the parade started. You have to live, even if you think you know better, I was telling myself. I was dressed as some sort of Hasidic zombie with a black caftan, fur-trimmed cap, and a skull mask I brought back from Mexico City. Sarah was a lawn flamingo. She had a pink beak, pink wings, yellow tights, little squares of astroturf, with felt chicken feet glued to the tops of her shoes. We drank coffee, made Bloody Marys, then walked over to our friend Kevin's house, then to our friend TR's house, then to the big gathering on Royal Street, where the drumming had already begun. Kevin looked like a West African king this year. TR wore plastic pants and a gold lame cape and space goggles and carried a huge black and gold umbrella. Deborah, whose outfit was so elaborate that I didn't recognize her at first, was the star from the tarot deck, a moving cloud of cream and pale blue tulle with a silver Venetian mask and silver gloves. It was the first sunny Mardi Gras in a couple of years, the sky full of reflected light from the river and the white clouds constantly changing, as in the Caribbean, and I had the vague feeling of walking through water as I entered the crowd, the colored streamers everywhere catching the mottled light, red, white, green, yellow, blue, all the shotgun houses overrun by dragons, peacocks, sultans, astronauts. When you wear a mask, you sometimes forget that people can't recognize you, even people you know. We were moving now, and it would be harder and harder to cohere anyway. The plan was to follow this stream of people into the French Quarter, then to try to make it to Canal Street to catch the end of Zulu, the parade of the historically black crew whose members dress as outrageous stereotypes in grass skirts with buckwheat wigs and giant fake cigars, and who bestow decorated coconuts upon the crowd that throngs their floats. There was actually a law in New Orleans that you couldn't sue for liability if you were injured by a flying coconut on Mardi Gras Day. A fun fact I kept mentioning that morning. We were moving along to the tinny beat of a karaoke machine on a decorated wheeled cart playing disco. This would go on for several hours in the streets and in bars, at friends' houses and at parties thrown by people we barely knew or didn't know at all. There would be flasks of whiskey and bowls of gumbo, plates of king cake and Frito pie, fried chicken bought at the gas station, and plastic cups filled with wine, sangria, gin and tonic. There would be a stop to see the Mardi Gras Indians in their elaborate hand-sewn suits of ostrich feathers and beads, the work of an entire year. The big chiefs with their retinues of spy boys and flag boys, initiates in a mystery cult and secret society of black pride. Maybe someone would catch a Zulu coconut. Maybe someone would lose his fake cane or lose his wallet. After a few hours, all of this would agglomerate into a whirling ball of color and sound, and you might not care if you lost your wallet or cane in any case. We were in the middle of the French Quarter now, the balconies jammed with tourists throwing beads down on us, and Sarah was dancing in her flamingo costume, stretching out her hands as wide as they could go, then spinning, then prancing off, then spinning again. If it doesn't sound graceful, then I'm not conveying it right. It was the kind of grace that even the writer in the skull mask was part of, brightly lit and grinning in the daytime crowd. Thanks, that's what I got today.
Thank you, Zachary. And people were enjoying that as well. Linda says, great description of the neighborhood streets early in the morning on Mardi Gras Day. And Andrea says, true about our having to use masks now for completely different reasons. So thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I know I appreciate you being here, and I know Megan does as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you.
And I'm going to bring back Megan to introduce our final reader.
Our final reader is the editor of our 2020 selection, which is New Orleans Griot, the Tom Dent Reader. This is such an exciting book for us. It's the first time we've ever had a book that's multi-genre. So we've got fiction, we've got some essays, we've got some poetry in here. And this is also the first time we've had a book that was edited rather than sort of having the author having put it together himself. So Kalamu Ya Salam, in a labor of love, put together the writings of his mentor, Tom Dent. We had a couple of amazing events around that this year before everything went online, and now we're really excited to be bringing this book to you through virtual events. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the editor of the Tom Dent Reader, Kalamu Ya Salam. Seems to be a little bit of trouble with your audio, but I can definitely see your face. Still can't quite hear you. While we get the audio figured out, I'll just go ahead and let you know that if you want to find out more about One Book One New Orleans, you can go to the website onebookonenola.org. You can also find us on Facebook at One Book One New Orleans, and you can find us on Instagram at One Book One NOLA. Ah, look at that! The website's on the screen. Candace, you're killing the game with this platform. Thank you so much. We cannot hear you, Kalamu. Is your mic turned on?
He's not muted in here, which means there's something on your end, Kalamu, that your mic might be muted, which has happened to me before where the actual mic is muted. But you're not muted in this stream. We'll have to try and figure this out.
Let me see here.
Also, while we're trying to figure this out, I will remind everyone watching that if you purchase any of the OBONO books from our bookshop list, 10% of the proceeds will be donated back to OBONO. So please go ahead and buy the books. Any of the selections that you've heard, all of the selections that you've heard from today are on the list. And that is at bookshop.org/shop/Tubby and Coos. You can buy all the books, including this year's book. So go and check that out as well. We'll see if Kalamu has.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yay!
Hey, we got it!
All right. All right, it's working now, okay? I can't hear myself, but I'm assuming that you can hear me.
Yes,
I'm going to read two.
So go ahead.
All right. Go ahead with your introduction. I got you now. This is two short, very short pieces from Tom about writing. This first is his, I guess you would say, his advice to writers. He says, quote, "You simply cannot just begin writing. You don't know what you're writing about. You're writing about yourself, and that is important. But you have to know how that relates to what has been written, what we've done, from Frederick Douglass through Ellison. You may not like it, you may not agree with it, but you've got to know it exists. Then you can begin to progress." Unquote. Essentially, Tom is saying you cannot progress if you don't know what the standard is? How are you going to move past the standard if you don't even know what the standard is? Or another way to say it, if you don't know where you're at, you don't know where you're going. You understand what I'm saying? And that's been a problem for many people who want to do anything, whether it's writing or dance or music or whatever. If you don't know what's happening, you know, you can't know how you can create, how you can contribute. You can't even know what there is to do, you know. And on top of all of that is all writing is in some language that is meant to communicate. So not only do you have to know the language in terms of how to write, but you have to know what has been written before you. Because words don't just spring fully formed from your mouth and not have any meaning, or from your pen and not have any meaning. You need to do, if you want to communicate, you need to do words that your audience can understand. So Tom is talking about all of that in that quote. And this other quote is a very short quote. Tom and I were talking about, it's from the interview we did called The Paper Trail. And he says that when that happens, and that means he's talking about when people compliment you or quote you based on your writing. He says, when that happens, it makes me feel good. Makes me feel good too. But you can't rest on that. In this work, you just keep struggling along, searching for new connections and discoveries. Unfortunately, there's no time to rest and be satisfied with what you did yesterday. There's no time to rest and be satisfied with what you did yesterday. And that should be every writer should deal with that. Because at some point we get tired or we get satisfied or we think we did it. But what you did yesterday, or to say it more poetically, yesterday's dues do not pay tomorrow's bills. Yesterday's dues do not pay tomorrow's bills. Whatever you did. That's Tom Dent. That's part of his advice. I strongly urge everybody to pick up New Orleans Grill and delve into it if you're at all interested in New Orleans culture, if you're interested in the status of our city, and specifically if you're interested in the culture. Tom's work will get you there. Thank you for the opportunity to share this. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments they want to make. I assume that's happening online.
It is. Thank you, Kalamu. And I'll share some of the comments with you. Liz just claps for you there with the clapping emojis. And we have Amy who said, but you've got to know it exists was a great point to keep educating yourself and explore what words people unlike you are using to tell their truth. And so that are some of the comments. It doesn't look like anyone had any particular questions, but thank you so much. I'm going to bring Megan back on as well.
Hey, Megan.
Hi, Kalamu. How are you?
I'm hanging on. How you be?
Doing all right. We gave away 20 copies of The Reader on Thursday to Hope House Adult Education, so I'm really excited. We're
Good.
Continuing on with our mission, even in these crazy times.
Right. Well, part of the craziness of the times is the assumption that many people have that these are unique times, that it's never happened before. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, The United States has faced two things before, which are repeating, which are one, pandemics in terms of health problems that transcend the borders of the United States, and two, stupid ass presidents. We've had both before. We'll survive.
Right. There's this meme going around that says history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And that's been resonating with me really hard this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes you never leave.
Absolutely.
You get stuck in one thing, and you just, well, part of it is people go with what they know. But the other part of it is, I think, as Tom always used to point out, you not only stay with what you know, you also want to have more of that. And it's very difficult for all of us, to one degree or another, to extend ourselves and to go beyond ourselves. It's not enough to have more of the same. Can we create something that doesn't exist now and expand on our world, and not just be satisfied with more of the same over and over and over again?
Yes. Well, thank you, Colombo. I just want to share with you a couple more because some folks are sharing the same sentiments that I do. Yeah, you're right. We will survive. I love this man. Such wisdom. Stuck on stupid from General Amore. So thank you so much, Kalamu, for being here and for sharing with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the technology. Sometimes I'm technologically challenged, but we'll make it.
We're all learning new skills. Every single one of us. Learning new skills every day.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to bring Megan back on just for some final comments. But first, I just also, again, want to remind everyone, you can visit Obono's website. It's onebook1nola.org. Also, if you purchase any of the Obono books from our bookshop list. So we created a list on our bookshop site that has all of the Obono books throughout the years on it. If you purchase any of those, 10% of those proceeds will be donated back to Obono. You can also email us if you don't want to go online and order. You can email us to purchase any of the books as well if you're interested. That's info@tubbyandcoos.com. And I'm going to leave Megan to share some final comments with y'all.
So quick couple of thank yous, Candace. You're amazing. Thank you so much. And also thank you to the New Orleans Book Festival. This is an online expanded version of what would have been a panel at the New Orleans Book Festival on March 20th. So we were really excited for the opportunity to bring it to you in some fashion. I think it's really cool that we ended with sort of laughing about learning new skills and how we learn new skills every day, because we started with lifelong learners and adult learners talking about how they're continuing to learn and grow in their literacy journeys. And really, we're all lifelong learners. And One Book, One New Orleans is so happy to support that in any way, shape, or form possible. So thank you to you all for engaging, for all your awesome comments, for your exclamation points. And I will hopefully see you soon. Bye.